Let's see. All right, hello and welcome to a Legacy Deck Tech brought to you by Jody MF Keith. Today I'm going to be showing you a Legacy lands list. If you don't know me, I'm a lands aficionado. Some people say I'm a master of the deck. I've been playing it for over 5 years. And before I get started, you might be wondering, what is this deck? Well, it's a 36 land deck, and it's similar to it's a combo control deck in Legacy. So whether you're just like dipping your feet in to Legacy and you want to see how the deck works, or if you're eyeballing a MP Tabernacle to try and start playing the deck, this is going to be the perfect place for you to find out exactly what you need to know. I'm going to go in depth, and so let's hit it right off. So yeah, lands is a combo control deck, and I'll start with the history of lands because I've been with it for a while. I like to say this is the third age of lands. The first age killed people with Treetop Village and Antuku Monastery, played many mana bonds, and the second age was more of a prison deck, and you would play Academy runes with engineered explosives and Oblivion Stone, and you would have intuition packages, and you could pretty much deal with just about any situation. But it was slow and grindy, and you only had you had two ways to kill them, usually with a Creeping Tar Pit or decking them naturally. So a lot of games went to time, and then when they changed the legend rule, it opened up this interaction between Dark Depths and Thespian Stage to allow you to win the game faster. So we'll start the deck tech at that. Let me explain to you. This is like I got the deck sorted out into different piles here, and like one of the bigger highlights and what has changed this deck tremendously to make it more powerful than it's ever been, in my opinion, is the interaction between Dark Depths and Thespian Stage. So Dark Depths is a legendary land. It doesn't tap for mana. It's like from a bygone era where lands didn't tap for mana, and it comes into play with 10 ice counters on it. And when you pay 3 mana to remove an ice counter, and whenever you remove all the counters, you can sacrifice it. If you do, you get a 20/20 flying black indestructible avatar creature token in Merit Lage. Alright, 20/20 is what I like to say. 20/20. So the way you cheat around spending 30 mana on this, you have Thespian Stage, which is a really interesting land for this deck because you can copy any land, and we have a lot of lands that do a lot of different things. So that's, if you need residuals of those copies, Thespian Stage can play that role, but its highlight is copying Dark Depths, because whenever it copies the Dark Depths, they're both legendary, so you have to sacrifice the original Dark Depths, and then you'll be left with the legendary Dark Depths right here. Thespian Stage will be the Dark Depths, and it'll see itself with no counters and then trigger a sacrifice to make the 20/20. So that's basically, you can make the 20/20 with 2 mana on the Thespian Stage and a Dark Depths. So that's the main route to victory in this deck. And even though we have a deck with 36 lands, you'd be surprised that people are like, oh yeah, you got plenty of lands. But the thing is, you don't have that many colored sources. Like in this pile is pretty much your generic mana producing lands. Like other lands produce mana, some of them don't. Some of them are ability lands that produce mana, but these are like solely only for mana. And in this pile we have the Mox Diamond, which is a free Mox that is used when it comes into play. As it comes into play, you have to discard a land or sacrifice it. Okay, and we'll come up to how that is mostly irrelevant. So it's with a deck with so many lands, it's like a Mox pretty much for any color, and generally we're just red-green in this list. You have Forest, you have Grove of the Burn Willows, which taps for either color that you're playing and gives your opponent a life, which combos with the Punishing Fire, which you can use to get back. We'll get into that later. Then you have fetch lands, you have Taiga. So we have 3 fetch lands, we have 3 fetchables, and we have a 4th fetchable right here, which is also a color source. Sheltered Thicket, one of the new cycle lands from Amonkhet. So this is your generic mana producing, and then this pile here is your engine. The whole deck is like, it's like a train coming out the gates and just starts to steamroll, and it starts with your acceleration, which is the Mox Diamond, the Exploration. This is 1 green mana. You can play an additional land each turn. It's really good with a deck with so many lands. And then you have Mana Bond. Now this one's a little tricky. The text on the live version of the card is different than what it actually does, but here, you read here, At the beginning of your end step, you may reveal your hand, put all land cards from it on the battlefield. If you do, discard your hand. So you put all the lands into play and you discard all the rest. So on turn 1, if you got like 1 land with the mana bond, you got 6 lands and a mana bond, you can put your whole hand into play off this mana bond. We only play 1 here, and I'll explain that in a sec. So that's your acceleration, to where you can start casting these Life from Loams more. You have Crop Rotation and Gamble. So Life from Loam, this is the true engine of the deck. And basically it's 2 mana, you can return 3 lands from your graveyard. And then anytime you would draw a card, you could dredge it. Dredge, you mill the top 3 cards of your deck, and usually that you'll hit some lands because you're such a land dense deck to get back with the loam. So it propels itself forward as a monster and card advantage. Also, we have Crop Rotation, which is as an additional card to cast it. You have to sacrifice a land, but then you can search your deck for any land, and so any situation you can get any land. Just about. The Crop Rotation is probably one of the best cards in the deck for sure. It's always a good top deck. We have Gamble, which is it is like a demonic tutor in a way. You can go get any card in your deck and put it in your hand. Then you have to randomly discard a card. So like there's a gamble that you're going to lose the card, but with the recursiveness of Life from Loam, and the recursiveness of Punishing Fire, it's generally not an issue because you can always get it back, or you end up discarding something else. So, and usually you're going to end up gambling, for Life from Loam is one of the hottest ones usually to get your engine started if you don't already have one. So you don't really care what you discard. Sometimes you get Punishing Fire if you already have a loam. So gamble's good before a loam and after a loam, because before a loam, if you don't have it, you can go get the loam. After the loam, you're casting Life from Loam in your hand, and your main phase is like 10 cards, after you loam. So when you gamble, it's like a 1 in 10 shot for any card. So odds are 90% of the time you're going to get to keep whatever you go get. So like oftentimes, if you have a hand with no acceleration, you can go get a mana bond after you Life from Loamed, and your hand is like 9 lands, and you gamble, and you get this 9-10 card gamble. You get the mana bond resolves, you drop all the lands into play. So the gamble can get anything. Also, if you already have the loam running and there's a land you need in particular, similar to Crop Rotation, you can go get the land before you cast the loam for the turn. And then if you randomly discard the land you went and got, you can loam back that land, and then you'll have the land. So gamble is probably the best tutor in the deck. And then, oh yeah. I don't know why that is so loud. I thought I turned off these alerts. Great. Okay. Desktop audio. Why don't I just turn all that off? Okay. Sorry about that. I'm doing this live on my Twitch. If you look at it, I got a link down below in the right above the comments. A link to my Twitch if you want to see me live. Once the Grand Prix prize money comes in, I'm definitely going to be having some lands queues going up. So if you want to see the deck played, be sure to drop a follow. We do giveaways, and we'll be streaming it leading up to. Well, we're gonna be streaming it forever because I love lands and I'm a lands master. So if you like the deck, you're enjoying the deck tech, and you want to see it played, after, just drop down below and check out the Twitch, and you could also see the link to my Twitter down below. I announce all my streams, so you're more than welcome to come check it out, and you can learn more from playing the games. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. All right, I gotta turn that down. All right, cool. Yeah. So sorry, I had all my alerts on here. So oh yeah, baby. Somebody's excited about the lands deck. All right, in the chat right now. And so yeah, it's a good time over here. So y'all drop by. I try and keep it educational. I try and keep it fun. Try and play some good music. So make sure y'all check out the link below. So getting back to it. So we have Gamble, which can get any card in our deck, which is good before the loam if we don't have it, after the loam if there's a land we need, and then after the loam if there's like a sideboard card we need to get, or any card in our deck that we need. Because when your hand's full of lands from Life from Loam, it's pretty unlikely that you'll actually discard what you're going to get. So this is pretty much the engine. We'll get down to these cycle lands. Previously, versions, you play multiple Tranquil Thickets, you have Horizon Canopy, and you have Gamble. And you have a Sheltered Thicket. Sheltered Thicket is a new addition from Amonkhet, which was a big improvement to the deck because it can be fetched by a fetch land. So there's a lot of lines where you fetch this up on turn 1 or turn 2, and then you sacrifice it to crop rotation and get it in the graveyard, and go tutor out the land that's going to keep you in the game. And then whenever you loam, you can loam back to shelter to get the cycle land in your hand. And the reason cycle lands and lands that draw cards like Horizon Canopy are so important to this engine is because it means you can cast multiple Life from Loams in a turn, which if you have Mana Bond out, that means you could be dropping 6 lands a turn into play by casting multiple loams. And then it's also really good at protecting your Life from Loams while they're in the graveyard. Nowadays, a lot of people, I feel like 30-40% of the decks play Deathrite Shaman, and if you have a loam naked in the graveyard and they go to exile it with a Deathrite and they spend their mana to exile it with Deathrite, you can cycle this Tranquil Thicket, you can cycle this Shelter Thicket, or you could crack this Horizon Canopy, this one obviously being the most visible effect. But if you have one of these concealed in your hand and they spend a turn Deathrite Shaman in your Life from Loam, you can easily cycle, and then you can dredge in response, which will remove it as a target. And then you get the loam to your hand, you increase your dredging, and then you can, next turn, Life from Loam, back the cycle land, and then keep the protection for your loam from the Deathrite Shaman / surgical, because a lot of people play surgical extraction. So, as long as you know how to play, you can definitely play around some hate. Alright, now for removal and protection, this is what a lot of the control elements of the deck are. You have 3 Maze of Ith. I've tried down to 2 recently in a team event, but 3 is definitely the number you want to be playing. And the deck list started out with 4, and I moved it down to 3, and everybody else moved it down to 3 as well. And it's 3 is like the right number. You see some lists with 2, maybe there's a meta where you only want 2, but there's less Tarmogoyfs now. But all the Delver decks, they're good against Delver because they're uncounterable removal for Delver. The only thing that they can play with it against it is like Wasteland, and if they're wasting a Wasteland on a Maze, you're kind of okay with that, as long as you're not dying. You also have Karakas, which protects you from enchantments. There's a lot of, from legendary creatures, and there's a lot of those going around with Reanimator, Sneak and Show, being able to return it. Sometimes even against like Maverick, they have like Thalia and Death and Taxes. Leovolt is also a hot new legacy card. So even though if you bounce it and they draw a card, sometimes you can set it up to where you bounce the Leovolt, then kill their Deathrite Shaman, and then double Wasteland them to where they can't ever replay the Leovolt. So even though there's the drawback of them drawing an extra card, this kind of catches all kinds of stuff. You can catch Vendilion Click in a pinch whenever you're trying to push through with your 20/20 Merit Lage token. It could bounce other Merit Lage tokens. It could bounce copies of Merit Lage tokens coming out of Merfolk. This is like, it's as good in the mirror match. You don't have to worry about the 20/20. Some Maverick decks, Night Reliquary decks, if you throw out a Dark Depths, they will go search out Thespian Stage, someone play one of them. So, there's some legends you really want to be taking care of. Most lands players, this is a point of contention in lands. Like, do you play the Karakas main? Do you play Bojuka Bog main, which exiles graveyards? Or do you play both main? Do you play none main? Everybody has a question, and I've always played the Karakas main, except for one tournament, and I played it in the board, and there was 2 games where if I had it in my main deck, I would have won the game against Sneak Attack, because game 1 they didn't know what I was playing. They went for early show and tell for an Emrakul, and I had a crop rotation that resolved, and I didn't have Karakas in my deck. So this is a card that I like to play. Lands is very subjective when it comes to the cards you play. I'm in a lot of lands groups, and everybody has their own ideas, and a lot of the deck has a lot of feeling. You got to become one with the deck in a way. It's kind of crazy to think about, but there's a lot of moving pieces to this deck. So if you don't have like your plan, my plan might not be your plan. I got a pretty good plan, but different people like to play the deck differently. I've watched several different people play in different ways, and I wouldn't think to play like that. I'm not saying there's always a right way, but usually there is a right way. But the paths can diverge so much in Legacy with so many cards to play around that the best way to learn how to play lands is to play it or watch me play it in the Twitch down below, and and we'll you get to learn all the little different situations. So I like the Karakas main deck. I've tried the Bog with the Karakas, both main deck, and I come to find that I want the Karakas main, and if I'm going to play the Bog main, that's a possibility, but I'm fine with it being in the sideboard. It's not that great against the Delver matches. If they have Dread, even just regular Snapcaster decks, the Bog's not even that great. I mean, Crocus is pretty dead too, but it does come into play untapped, which is a thing of note. Like if you look at these cycle lands, I decided to play the Horizon Canopy over a second Tranquil Thicket or fourth Grove because I wanted an extra draw effect over this Grove here. But the real reason was because it came to play untapped. That's why I favored it over the cycle lands. So getting back to this Crocus. Now this land is called Glacial Chasm. It's a bit of a doozy on the text. Cumulative upkeep, you pay 2 life. That means the first turn, the next upkeep that after it came into play, you have to pay 2 life to keep it in play. And the next turn you have to pay 4 and then 6. Otherwise you have to sacrifice it. Okay, this is a little tricky card here. When it enters the battlefield, you have to sacrifice a land. So you lose a land drop on the deal. So generally you want some form of acceleration before you start trying to establish a Glacial Chasm lock or protecting yourself with a Glacial Chasm. Because sometimes you'll just play it to protect yourself. How does it protect you? Creatures you control cannot attack. You see, because if you can't attack, then that means you can't lose your creatures in combat. So Glacial Chasm saves you from attacking. No, but for real though, the bottom line is what saves you. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. Okay, that's all damage. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be Progenitus. True Name Nemesis is generally a time when an opponent lands a True Name Nemesis is usually a time when you want to try and put yourself in a position, usually in game 1, to try and set up a Glacial Chasm lock to where you won't die to this True Name. So you need to establish yourself. The trickiest thing about this card is timing and when to play it and what to do with it. And always remember, put a dice on top of your deck if you're playing live. That way you will not forget the upkeep. I've definitely forgotten the upkeep on it before, and it is pretty embarrassing when that's your main line of attack and you forget to do it. So, you know, that's a good Magic habit. Put a dice on top of your deck so you won't forget. This one you're not going to want to forget because you end up looping the Chasm with the Thespian stage. Okay, so we went over Thespian stage earlier where you copy a land. So here's how you establish a Glacial Chasm lock. Okay, some decks are very soft to it. Mostly important, like burn decks are really soft to it, especially game 1. And then so are elf decks are generally very soft to the Glacial Chasm deck. Glacial Chasm lock. And so what you end up doing is any match where you know the Glacial Chasm is like golden, like a deck with no wasteland that kills you with regular damage, you know, you'll be able to find it out. You know, you'll know if Glacial Chasm is going to be a beast or not. You have crop rotation in your hand, you know you can't die. You know, because they're going to go for a big natural order. They're going to play a bunch of elves. They're going to natural order in this thing. They're going to attack you. When they attack you, you crop rotation, get the Glacial Chasm, save yourself. You see what I'm saying? And so, and then on the next upkeep, you can pay the 2 life because you have plenty of life because you didn't take any damage that turn. And then you can go to your next turn, pay the life, and then you can establish the lock by setting up a Thespian stage in play. So, like, say you paid 2 life, then the next turn you pay 4 life. The next turn you're gonna have to pay 6, and you don't want to pay the 6. And so, if you have a Thespian stage on your upkeep with the Glacial Chasm cumulative upkeep on the stack, you can copy it with a Thespian stage, and then the Thespian stage will be a copy of Glacial Chasm. You can sack the original, and then now you have the stage as a copy. So you get to keep the Chasm in play, and there's never a window where you don't have one in play. So they can't insert any burn spells or damage at any point. You know, it's running 24/7. Another way to do it is to just naturally life from loam back to Glacial Chasm. Say you don't have a stage, your Thespian stage is Pithing Needled, there may be Surgical from the game or something like that. You can play the Glacial Chasm naturally. You have to sacrifice the land when you do. And then on your upkeep, you can sacrifice the Chasm and not pay for it. Dredge your loam it back. Now the problem with this, it's not as hard of a lock because during your upkeep there's a window to deal damage to you. Not all decks can do damage to you in your upkeep, but there are some. So you got to be very careful about paying too much life and then putting yourself in burn range. But you can sack the Chasm on your upkeep, then you can loam it back, and then you can replay it. But you lose a land drop, so you want to make sure you have at least 1 exploration in play. Because if you have an exploration, you can keep it going. Now you need to be able to keep it going and then also do stuff. So you would want more lands to like be drawing cards or returning punishment fires while you kill their creatures, while you keep replaying this Chasm. That way you can like develop a board position while hiding behind the Chasm. But the true hard lock is with the Thespian stage, because which you can actually beat because without an exploration, because you can use the Thespian stage to copy the Glacial Chasm, and then you can loam that turn, and then you can play a second Thespian stage, which doesn't cause you to sacrifice land when it comes to play like Glacial Chasm, and then on the next upkeep you have to copy it with a stage. That's the burden of playing. You're going to have to pay 2 mana to copy on your upkeep, so it's kind of like losing mana for the turn, but not necessarily land drops. So that's a card, really needs a lot of explanation, because there's definitely some chatter around, oh yeah, Glacial Chasm, I don't know if that's that good, maybe I should play it on the board. And I'm pretty sure that this card is always going to be, I say pretty sure, but listen, if there's ever a time in the history of Legacy where Glacial Chasm is not any good main deck, then that means I probably shouldn't be playing lands. Whew! So, Glacial Chasm, I got more to say about it too. We'll get back to it in a second. Barbarian Ring is another piece of removal. It's a threshold land. It taps to deal you 1 damage. One thing to note is that the 1 damage, while you have Glacial Chasm out, this actually protects you from your own damage too. So, keeps you from attacking, keeps you from dealing damage to yourself. It's a little padded room, Glacial Chasm. Look, that looks like a cushy little place to be in. But you have Barbarian Ring. You can pay red, tap, sacrifice, deal 2 damage to target creature or player. Okay, you can use this to kill your opponent, if they have some way to deal with your 20/20. You could also use it to kill creatures. And you could also use it to, some creatures that you really want to have this Barbarian Ring for are, like when you're playing against Mother Runes, because they can give their creature protection from red, which will save it from these other red cards. But it won't save it from Barbarian Ring because it's colorless. You also have Molten Vortex, which is also Barbarian Ring. You get crop rotation for it, so it turns your crop rotation into a removal spell late in the game. You have Molten Vortex, which is 1 red. It's an enchantment. You pay 1 red, discard a land, deal 2 damage to target creature or player. Okay, you can combine that with Life from Loam, getting back 3 lands a turn to just start shooting people out. So if your opponent has like a Blood Moon in play, this is an alternate victory route as well. Because if you have a Forest or a Mox Diamond, you can cast a Loam, and then you have all the mountains from the Blood Moon to just throw the Molten Vortex in. You also have Punishing Fire, which deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Whenever an opponent gains life, you may pay a red to return to your hand. This combo is with the Grove of the Burning Willows. So you can tap the Grove, give them a life, pick up the Punishing Fire, use the Punishing Fire, kill their Deathrite Shaman. And all the damage is 2 damage. So you use the 2 damage to usually kill Deathrite Shamans, Delver, Stoneforge, Mother Runes, Thalia. A lot of the legacy creatures are real small, so this is why this is your removal suite. There are bigger creatures, and generally these aren't great against the bigger creatures if they have to use the effect multiple times, but don't be scared to do it if the situation calls for it. And then this one kind of falls, this is the namesake of the deck, Tabernacle, not the namesake, but this is the card you need to play the deck, the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale. This is the most expensive card on the deck. I was lucky that I've been playing this deck this long because I picked up 2 when they were really cheap. I say really cheap, like $200. So I'm glad to have the Tabernacle, and I'm just happy to be playing lands. But it's a shame that it's so expensive because, well, that's Legacy Reserve List. We'll have to save that for another video. But basically this land, another one of those old lands that doesn't tap for mana. All creatures have, at the beginning of your upkeep, destroy this creature unless you pay 1. It's very important when you play this card, especially in real life, that you explain to your opponent what is going on. Some people say, oh yeah, I know what's going on, but be like, look, you understand, when you play it, you're like, you know what this card does, is what I always say. I'm like, do you know what this card does? They say, yeah. And if they seem competent, then I'll go with it. If they look a little hesitant, like they don't know, and they have some creatures in play, then I say, hey, look, this land gives your creatures this ability. So they're your triggers, they're individual triggers per creature, and you can stack them however you like. That's what I tell them, just like that. So it's on you to stack this ability. Not me, but you. And I just want to make you fully aware of that. I'm not trying to hide the fact that this land is here. Some people try and play the little Tabernacle, maybe they think I'm cheesing people, where you go Tabernacle go, and then don't explain anything, and they draw a card, and you're like, aha, all 4 of your creatures die. And it's like, no, I don't do that. But I clearly explained to them, and half the time I'm fine with them paying for the creatures. Like if you're not playing any spells, that's pretty cool. So this acts as 2 different piles. This pile is the mana denial pile, and it's also the and then this is the removal pile. So sometimes it's removal, and when they pay for it, it's mana denial. So in some matches, they're spending their mana to play this. That means they're not playing planeswalkers, they're not playing cantrips, they're not bettering their board. And then with the combination of these wastelands and these ghost quarters, destroy target non-basic land. There's plenty of them in Legacy. Ghost quarter, destroy it, and you destroy target land, and then they may search their deck for a basic land and put it on the battlefield. So Legacy, usually they'll either have no basics, a couple basics, and there's a few decks that play a ton of basics. So Ghost quarter is pretty good, but you deny them the mana, and then their creatures die to the Tabernacle. That's a common route to destroying creatures of the Tabernacle. You turn it from taxation to death by taxes. So this is the deck. This is the main deck. I pretty much went over all the cards in the main deck. There's a couple questions that usually come up with lands, and the people want to know like the weaknesses of the deck. And the way that the deck is configured right now is I find that there aren't that many weaknesses. The biggest weakness is probably to spell decks, obviously, like decks that can kill you without needing many lands, or that kill you fast and they don't play creatures, like Storm, Ant, what else? Sneak and Show, Mono Red Sneak and Show, especially because they also play Blood Moon, which is a serious hate card against this, and any kind of deck like Alurin and stuff like. Well, Alurin's not that bad because it's a creature combo. Elves similar, but those are all pretty close to the middle. Combo decks are generally not that good of a matchup, and we'll go over how we board for them. But overall, the deck itself isn't really easy to hate out if the player knows how to play around the hate. So again, that's why I say you really have to put in reps with the deck. It's definitely worth the investment. If you play this deck in a year from now, and you master a lot of things. I still learn things with the lands deck, through other lands players. I know most of the tricks though. I definitely know not all the tricks. I'm always looking for another trick, and so it's and then the deck is not very you get punished really hard if you don't play the deck right. So it's not very forgiving, is the word I was looking for. So really you got to put the reps in. So as far as the hating the deck out, people come with Surgical Extraction and try and turn off your Life from Loam engine. Or like sometimes you'll dredge a Dark Depths and they'll just exile your Dark Depths for your Thespian stage. Some people play Pithing Needle to turn off your Thespian stage. Some people play Blood Moon, back to the basics. These type of cards that attack non-basic lands. Sabo's Web. I guess you don't see that one that much, but there's abundance of cards that hate out lands. But what I like to describe to you is the way this deck actually works. Like if you see, I have it in separate piles here. We have like this combo here, and we have this resource denial on this end. So basically, if you look at the picture of the deck, the deck comes this way and it comes this way, and they couldn't be further from each other in the way that they attack opponents and the cards that are necessary to defend. So like Surgical is a good card because if you're coming at them this way, they can Surgical, but unlike Surgicaling a deck with a linear strategy, we just jump over this plan. So the Surgical is not that big of a deal to me. If you Surgical me a couple times, okay, am I going to try and play around Surgical? Yes. Sometimes it doesn't matter. I got the combo in my hand. Yeah, I'm going to Loam and do this over here, and I'm going to throw my Loam into a Surgical because I already know that I'm planning on coming at you this way. And, they complement each other, though. Like, Thespian Stage works with Maze of Ith and Glacial Chasm, like we were speaking on earlier. So, they complement both sides of each other. And then the Wastelands and the Ghost Quarters are really good against Wastelands and Ghost Quarters and Karakas and Maze of Ith. And, all these cards that people can play to try and attack your 2020. So, they complement each other for sure. This is another reason, that reminds me of another reason why Ghost Quarter, I play the Ghost Quarters over Rashad Import, because this is probably like the most hot button issue on lands. Like, why don't you play Rashad Import? I saw Jarvis Hughes playing 3 ports and 1 Ghost Quarter. Okay, that works for Jarvis. I've definitely tried it. I've played plenty of ports, but I've been on the Ghost Quarter plan for over a year and a half. I really like what it does. In some matches, it's better than Wasteland. It's really funny when your opponent, fetches their only basic out of their deck so that they can't be Wastelanded, and then you come with the Ghost Quarter, and now they don't even have a basic to get out of their deck. So, in a lot of instances, it is just straight Wasteland, and then every time it's not port. The advantages to Rashad Port. Rashad Port is a land that you can tap to tap target land. You tap one and tap it. So you need to use 2 lands to get a tap on a land. Okay. What's cool is you don't have to sacrifice the port to get the effect. So when you sacrifice the Ghost Quarter, sure you can get it back with Loam, but if Loam's not rolling, that's not great. Also, it is a mana source, so if you don't have any kind of mana acceleration, it is kind of costly because you might need that mana to be casting Punish of Fire soon, or Light from Loam itself. So sacking the land isn't always the best, and also if they have basic lands, they don't lose that much. So whereas Rashad Port, if they have basic lands, you can attack their mana without having to give up your own resources. You gain no advantage if they play multiple basic lands, like in decks like Death and Taxes and Miracles. So that's why people, like the Rashad Port. Personally, I like to think of this deck as a heavy combo element, and which makes this deck, in my opinion, the best deck, because you have this combo that many people can't interact with, that just pretty much gets free wins. And so, like in doubts, in doubtful situations or against whatever cards, you could always fall back on making a 20/20. It's like, oh, he jammed me up, he surgical my Loam, and he did this other thing, and he played it back to the basics, and I don't know how I'm going to win this game. And then you're like, oh, well, I'll just save up and make a 20/20 and kill them. So definitely you put your opponent in a tough position. Now, you want them to do everything you can do to push through the Dark Depths. So usually people being scared or knowing that they're weak to the strategy, the only card that they have to interact with this is Wasteland itself. Wasteland. So you usually, if you play Rashad Port, you want to set it up to where you have the 4 lands / Mox or whatever, because that's what you need to make the combo. On top of that, you need a Rashad Port and a whole other mana source to be able to port their Wasteland. And then when you port their Wasteland, they have to choose right now. Do you want to kill a stage? Do you want to kill a depths? Do you want to kill some other land? If they pointed at either one of these, you just stage, copy depths, and make your 20/20. So you force the action with Rashad Port. Well, the Ghost Quarter, it forces the action with 1 less land. And so it makes it faster. If they have a Wasteland sitting out there, you got to wait and get 2 more land drops to get through the Wasteland. What happens when they play a second Wasteland? What if they top deck a brainstorm into another Wasteland right here? Maybe you don't have time to set it up. You're never going to be able to 20/20. And 20/20 gets you at a lot of spots. I mean, obviously it's a win condition, but when your mana and resource denial plan is not working or not effective in a match, then the 20/20 is like saving your butt big time. So the Ghost Quarter pushes it through Wasteland, aside from the other things that it does. But another little known thing, not little known, but not always seen, is that Ghost Quarter is actually a green mana source, guys. Yeah, guys and girls, we play 1 force in the deck. So there's, like I said, if you look at all these piles, the way I look at the deck anyway, you got it piled out the way I look at it. This Ghost Quarter can easily be a green mana source, because when we look at it, that's not that much green mana. We have like less green mana than we have green cards. Like we move this over here and it's what, dead even? Or no, actually these are red cards. But yeah, just colored mana in general, we don't have that much of it. We have a lot of colorless lands too, and some of these lands are legendary, like 4 Dark Depths. You get multiple Dark Depths in your hand with a stage, you kind of want to keep it. You got an Exploration or Crop Rotation, and you're like, I don't have any green, but then you got a Ghost Quarter over here, not a Rashad Port, but a Ghost Quarter. You can Ghost Quarter your own land, and then you can go get a force out of your deck and start casting your mana bonds and your explorations to get you rolling or cast your Loam. And usually it's not that big of a disadvantage if you have an enchantment, which you're trying to get in play with the green mana. So it makes a lot of hands more keepable. Also, usually opponents don't see it coming in post-boarded games when you're trying to cast like Krosan Grip. You can have this Ghost Quarter up and just Ghost Quarter yourself and go get your green for a crop rotation or something. If they go to Wasteland, one of your lands, you can Ghost Quarter to go make sure you save yourself with a force so you can keep the Loam going. Because the deck doesn't have many green resources, so people don't attack them often enough because they assume that you're just going to Loam it back, or you have so many lands it doesn't matter anyway. But it's not that hard to cut this deck off of colored mana. An Abrupt Decay on a Mox and then a Wasteland on a Grove can really put the lands deck tight on resources and unable to actually cast anything. It falls victim to it You know, like people don't, you know, force will is mox enough sometimes. So basically, that's the deck. The strategy goes two ways. That's what makes it really powerful and hard to hate out. That's what I like most about the deck. It reminds me a lot of the Thopter Depths combo deck from Extended that Jerry T developed, and it really, there were two separate decks and he put them together, and like having the cards in the middle, you know, work well with both sides of the combo. If you remember that deck, it really has the power level of that, which is pretty impressive to say since that deck's all banned up. So, and it also played Dark Depths, so. Anyway, so we'll move on to the sideboard. I'll talk about some of these cards. You got Bojuka Bog, which I touched on earlier. It's a land, comes into play tapped, and it taps for black mana, not that relevant. And when it comes to play, you exile target player's graveyard. Okay, so this is really effective with crop rotation. It's not as good in your hand, but having it in your deck as a crop rotation target can really blow out a dredge or a reanimator player. You know, or sometimes there's a nimble mongoose beating you up. You can go get this Bojuka Bog and, you know, knock it down to 1. You know, you can counter a Snapcaster with a crop rotation if that's something. I've definitely gotten in spots where I crop rotated my own. I remember I was trying to save my loam so bad that I ghost quartered my own land and then to get a forest, and then crop rotated another land to get a bog, to bog myself in response to a surgical on a loam, because it was so important that I kept the loam with the other loam in my hand. So that's Bojuka Bog. It's great against the lands in the mirror. You can take them off loam. You pretty much board it in against like Reanimator. If they have any kind of threshold effect, I sometimes board it in against Omni Show, but I'll get into it's just for a trick. You really don't need it, but there's a trick you can do with it. I'll explain that trick later. But basically, you know, you'll know any kind of graveyard deck. Not so much Deathrite or I like to board it straight up for the Karakas, because you want to keep mana producing lands in your deck against like Delver decks, but I like putting the Bog in against Delver decks because like you can just play a Bog out there on turn 2 and it can slow down a Gurmag Angler from coming down, but it swaps easy with Karakas when I sideboard, unless there's some kind of Reanimator deck, in which case I want both. You have Tireless Tracker. The idea behind Tracker used to be lands has always been on the hunt for like a win condition or card advantage engine that doesn't use the graveyard, so that when they attack your life from loam, you still have card advantage in your deck, because that's what you're killing people with, is card advantage. And you know, this spot has seen, you know, Primeval Titan, it's seen Oracle of Moldiah, where you can play the lands off the top of your deck. I've even played Corsair Curfix, tried them all the different cards that you can think about. Sylvan Library, you know, there's a lot of different options for that. You know, people even have played Sensei Divining Top. Some people play Planeswalkers in this spot. You know, it's all pretty good. Tireless Tracker is just kind of effective to me because, number one, it's a creature. Okay, so it's really good to have a creature when your opponent like boards in. They're going to board low on removal, so he's not going to really be that killable. And if they have removal, they might leave in like Swords to Plowshares or a couple, you know, Diabolic Edict to make you sacrifice your 20/20. So you can block an Edict, you know, for your 20/20. But most importantly, it's about making the clues. The next part is the artifact hate, which is like, usually I like to play 6 pieces. I think we're missing one. We got a 14 card sideboard. This last one's supposed to be a sphere. Yes, another sphere here. Okay, so it's 4 sphere resistance, 1 Thorn of the Amethyst, and 1 Trin Sphere. The 4 sphere resistance, it's 2 mana, all spells cost 1 more to cast. Okay, so it slows them down, especially with the mana denial. You also have Thorn of Amethyst, non-creature spells cost 1 more, which is pretty much the same as this card in a lot of matchups. The ones where you wouldn't really want this is like if you play against elves, this isn't really going to do much against them. And then the last one, I play 1 Trinisphere. As long as it's in play, all spells, they got to pay 3 mana, you included, to play your spells and their spells. So this one's pretty good. Some people like to play Chalice of the Void. Personally, I don't think Chalice of the Void belongs in the lands deck anymore. There was definitely lists where you played it. I've played 1 in the sideboard sometimes. There's some matchups where it's great, but if you look at our mana curve, this is a lot of 1-drops right here. The whole deck is 1 and 2 drops. So like Chalice of Void on 1 turns off a lot of our deck. You know, we're a lot weaker to it than people think. And so like there was packages where we played 4 Chalices, but that was mostly against the whole Miracle decks when they played Top and Swords. You turn that off and you played 4 Trackers, so you were able to cut these gambles and tutors and stuff and just go with natural card draw to get where you wanted to go with the Chalices. So you have Sphere, Thorn, and Trinosphere. And I like the Spheres and the Thorn. They're similar cards. A land I'd like to highlight that many people don't agree with playing in Land's main deck is Ancient Tomb. I originally got the idea from Jerry Thompson when he was playing the deck 3 years ago at an Invitational. He was playing one in his sideboard. And the idea behind it was, since we're touching on the Spheres, was that normally if you're playing Spheres, and I've played Chalices and Spheres before in Mox Diamond decks that weren't lands. They have those in the 4-color loam decks, and so the only way to get that Sphere or Chalice or whatever down on turn 1 is to have a natural Mox Diamond in your hand. So that's only 4 ways to turn 1 a Sphere. And if you're on the draw, you better have it on turn 1, you know, because if you're casting on turn 2, it's nothing great. So when you get to the Ancient Tomb, you get 4 ways. You get 5 ways now, and then when you add on the crop rotations, that makes 9 different ways. You could very easily go turn 1 Taiga, crop rotation, get Ancient Tomb, tap the Ancient Tomb, Sphere Resistance, turn 1. And before they play anything, if they don't have a Force of Will, then they're not going to play anything on turn 1. So, definitely, the Ancient Tomb has definitely earned its weight. Another instance where Ancient Tomb is great, aside from that play, is you need 2 mana to copy with Stage. So there's a lot of boards where you have like Stage, Dark Depths, and a Forest, or a Taiga of some kind. And it's only 3 lands, and it doesn't look like you can make it 20/20 right there. So your opponent will spend their turn not playing a Wasteland or tapping their Wasteland to play a True Name Nemesis or something like a Leovolt, and they won't play a Wasteland, you know, because they don't expect it to come, and then you can crop rotation your Forest away because your board is Taiga, Dark Depths, and Stage, and you just turn this into an Ancient Tomb, and then what do you have? A 20/20, and it's like, didn't even say I come. You got a 20/20 Ancient Tomb. Now it is at the cost of 2 damage for the 2 mana, but I think it's definitely worth it. Another instance where this is really good is when you have no enchantment and you have Glacial Chasm. You have the Glacial Chasm lock on them. So this right here, you have to copy this continually with the Thespian Stage. And since you have the Chasm in play, you don't take any damage from your own Ancient Tomb, which is really sweet, because most players don't know that. So it's really funny because you'll be playing and you'll be like, tap Ancient Tomb, because everybody's always looking for you to tap Ancient Tomb, especially when you're low on life, because you got a Chasm out. You're like at 6, you're like, tap Ancient Tomb, Thespian Stage will copy this, and then they're like, oh, take 2, and I'm like, nah, dude, I'll take 2 right here. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, Glacial Chasm, check it out. I can't take damage, but it's fair because I can't attack. So that's always the lands jokes, you know. You gotta put the jokes on them. You're playing all sorcery speed stuff. You know, you're just out here. You know, the game is on the board. They know all the cards in your hand. You know, you gotta have some kind of entertainment. But yeah, so you got the Ancient Tomb to push through these spheres early. Then this right here is the removal. I know everybody wants to hear the story about this card. Drop of Honey. You have Pithing Needle. Let's start with this one. I've been playing Pithing Needle for some time. I like Pithing Needle. It's a very flexible card. It's a great card in Legacy. I'd say it's the #1 card against lands, personally. Like, of all the hate cards that you can play, and it goes because it could go in any deck, just like Surgical. Pithing Needle is the one. You play with Pithing Needle, especially if you're playing a deck without artifacts or enchantments, because if you're not playing artifacts or enchantments, then I don't board in any way to destroy a Pithing Needle. Nobody would. So Pithing Needle, I think, is one of the best hate cards because it can definitely hit any part of the deck. You know, you got a couple Tarmogoyfs, I'm D'ing up with a Maze of Ith or 2. You can just drop the Pithing Needle, name the maze, and I can just die your Tarmogoyfs right there. You know, that's a huge possibility. I'm over here trying to wasteland your lands, or your hand is a lot of non-basics in it, and you're worried about wasteland, and all you got to do is hit 3 mana for something. Then you can come down and name wasteland and protect your lands until you can play, you know, more hate or whatever you're playing, your own combo or whatever the deal is. You can name Thespian Stage, and then I can't copy the Dark Depths or anything else. Now, one thing you don't want to mess up with is the Thespian Stage Pithing Needle interaction. When an opponent plays a Pithing Needle, and you have a Thespian Stage in play, if you're the lands player, with the needle on the stack, you have mana to activate this, even though there's no Dark Depths in play. So you just have like a Forest and a, you know, a Taiga in play, which are Thespian Stage. And they go, Pithing Needle, you should tap these 2 lands and Thespian Stage and turn it into any other land. You'd be like, turn it into a Forest. Because what'll happen then, it'll change the name of the Thespian Stage. So when this needle resolves, they have to name Forest to turn this particular Thespian Stage off. Okay, now that means all future Thespian Stages will be ready to roll. So that's, you always want to make sure, like, you know, if I'm going for the 2020, you got to know all the ways to defend yourself against the cards that they can play. Another way to defend against defend your Thespian Stage is having a Forest in play, or noticing that your opponent has a basic land. Because if you're worried about wasteland, what you can do is preemptively Thespian Stage, like, you have a Mox out there and you play a Taiga and you Punishing Fire or something, and then next turn you play a Thespian Stage. So you have these 3 lands in play, they have a basic land in play. Go ahead and just tap out and copy their basic land. Because if they top deck a wasteland and they play it, the only target is going to be this Taiga right here, you know. So, because this becomes a basic land if it copies a basic land. And it still has the ability to become something else after that. But it is technically a basic land, so they can't wasteland it. Also, if somebody goes to wasteland your Thespian Stage, maybe it's good to have a Forest or a fetch. You know, some people, there's a huge misplay that people make against lands. So if you don't play lands, make sure you don't wasteland a Thespian Stage. Will have 2 mana up and a basic land in play. And when I say a basic land in play, it doesn't have to be a basic land. It could be like a Ghost Quarter. You know, I could Ghost Quarter one of my lands and go pull a Forest out of my deck and then copy it. You know, so you definitely want to be careful and guard yourself against people trying to take advantage of your Thespian Stages, especially when you got Dark Depths or 2 sitting in your hand. So this is the way you're trying to win. You know, don't play them out there loose. Don't expose them to surgical extractions. You know, if you play a Mox and you're pitching a Thespian Stage, make sure you're playing another one. That way you don't get this one in your hand. They don't go, oh, surgical your stage just because I can't beat a 2020. And then you got this other one in your hand. You know, you got to be careful with that. As soon as the Mox resolves, play your Thespian Stage, you know. You got to look for plays like that to play around the hate. Because there are hate cards, but, you know, they're not really that powerful, in my opinion. Any of them. Like, I mean, they are powerful cards, but, like, when you know about them, and, like, I just recently top-8'd Grand Prix Las Vegas, and I felt like I was at the biggest advantage in the whole top 8 of being able to see my opponent's deck list. Because they can look at this, like y'all are looking at it right now, and you might not understand all the little nuances. But me, whenever I see your list, it's like I know all the tricks I need to be coming with, all the traps I can set, and you know, this is one of them. Whew. So that's Pithing Needle. Pithing Needle is probably the card that has killed me the most. Turn off the Molten Vortex, turn off the Barbering, turn off the Caracas, turn off the Mazevith, turns off a lot of parts of the deck. Obviously it's only 1 needle, but you know, it only costs 1 mana, so if they have a land, they can easily play it. You can't keep them off of it. I mean, if they have a Blood Moon, you can keep them off Blood Moon with Wasteland and Sphere Resistance and stuff. But Pithing Needle's coming down. So it's definitely a good card against lands. It's probably the card I've died to more than any other sideboard or hate card that I've seen. Drop of Honey. This is the card everybody wants to know about. It's 1 green. It says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you destroy the creature with the least power. If there's a tie, you choose which one dies. When there's no creatures in play, you have to sacrifice a Drop of Honey. So this is like the 2 extra removal spots right here. And it's Drop of Honey right now, but you can play other cards. But I mean, honestly, I think Drop of Honey is the best fit right here. And all the time I play lands, I've never, you know, seen in my mind playing Drop of Honey. And when I first saw it 3 weeks before the Grand Prix. I was in a lands chat, and they dropped a list from a Japanese tournament where somebody played a drop of honey in the sideboard. And as soon as I read the card, I was like, oh yeah, that's the old periphery nodes. Yeah, I remember a drop of honey. Okay, cool. And then I'm like, oh snap, we got to get two in the sideboard, no doubt. And I didn't even test the game with it. I was just like, I know this is gonna be good, knowing lands and knowing what it does. And so the reason why it works so well in this deck is because in Legacy right now in this format, and why it's so good right now is because all the decks they try and beat you with Deathrite Shaman, right? So they come with Deathrite Shaman, and then they come with Young Pyromancer. You know what I'm saying? Like a Delver is easy to beat. You can beat a Delver with a Punch of Fire. You've been killing Delvers with Maze of Iths, you know. So like, you know, that's not that big a deal. But whenever they come with and Tabernacle and Wasteland and stuff, you know, it's pretty easy to beat them. But when they come with the mana acceleration creatures, like a Noble Hierarch, and you're like, oh, what's coming next? Oh, Leovold. See, Leovold's trouble. You know, True Name Nemesis, that's trouble. Because you really can't deal with those cards in any kind of profitable way. Where, you know, this sideboard spot has been a couple different things. You know, sometimes it's the second Molten Vortex, and then other times it's the extra Punishing Fire. So I've been recently playing this spot has recently been a Kozilek's Return, one of. To explain that a little further, I will not diverge into that story until I finish Drop of Honey. Those cards, those removal spells are great against Death and Taxes. Sanctum Prelate has been a problem and changed the format a lot, because when they named 2, it would turn off your Punishing Fires and it would turn off your Life from Loams, which is how you win the game in that match, through card advantage, because they can interact with your 20/20. So Drop of Honey comes in great against Death and Taxes because it doesn't target, so they can't Mother of Runes their creature. They usually are spamming multiple creatures into play, you know, because if they only have 1 or 2, that's not enough pressure through a single Maze of Ith. You know, it gives you too much time to set up. So Drop of Honey, they span the board, you play the Drop of Honey, and now they have this decision. You know, they go Noble Hierarch and they go True Name, and then you drop a Drop of Honey on them, and it's like, well, what do? Do I just sit here and not contribute to the board, and then let my opponent basically go unmolested, you know, for the next 2 turns till this Drop of Honey dies and my creatures die, you know? Or do I need to keep playing creatures to where I can keep pressuring my opponent? And so it really forces your opponent, similar to the way the deck's set up. You know, a lot of your wins are just from your opponents not knowing exactly what to do in each situation, and what line of attack they need to be coming with, or how you're trying to fend them off. And so it's easy to exploit that. And Drop of Honey it works in the very same way. So I think it's great. It kills all kinds of stuff. You know, you get the clean kill on True Name Nemesis because it doesn't target. You get the clean kill on Leovold without them drawing a card because it doesn't target. You, if against like Grixis Delver, they come with a Deathrite Shaman into a Young Pyromancer and a Ponder, you can play the Drop of Honey, and then on upkeep, Deathrite Shaman goes. You know, then you start picking off the 1/1s. So they want to play more spells, so they're going to play their spells at inopportune times to try and keep their Young Pyromancer and keep it all going, instead of giving up on it, you know. And people do that, and then sometimes they give up on it, and you get like 2 turns of just destroying their creatures for free while you're advancing your board position. Sometimes they'll have like a Gurmag Angler out and a Young Pyromancer and some guys, and you'll be over here and you'll be like mazing the big guy, eating the little guys until you get all the way up to the Gurmag. I got in a spot where I had a Drop of Honey out against Infect, and I Glacial Chasm him, and he ended up playing 2 more, and I was paying all this life to keep this Chasm in play, and he was playing more creatures, and I would eat him and hide behind the Chasm, then eventually copy the Chasm, then copy the Chasm, and eventually Drop of Honey killed 5 of his creatures. You know, and then it was like, well, what was left after that? Doesn't matter. You know, you gave up all that to 1 card, you know. And then, so it's definitely worth its weight. You know, I don't know if it's worth $500 or whatever it's going for nowadays, because it's 2 of in a sideboard, but it is definitely a premier card for this deck. If you can get them, you want to try and play it. It's great because it gets the clean kills on some of the best creatures in the format. I don't recommend boarding in against Reanimator or Sneak Attack or something like that, but it could do that in a situation. And that's the thing with lands is like there's a lot of subjective picks. Sometimes, you know, based on how your opponent's playing, you might change your strategy a little bit, and that comes with time and learning. So it's a great tool to have, and learning how to play it well is also really good. And if you don't play lands and you're looking at this just trying to figure out what to do, you know, just be wary about what path you take, and know which, you know, what their setup is and to where you give them the route that they don't get the most advantage off of. Lastly, we have Krosan Grip. It's a pretty standard split second destroy artifact or enchantment. It used to be really good against counterbalance, which was a big enemy since he's divining top decks, but nowadays it's pretty much in the sideboard to kill blood moons. You don't see yourself killing too much other stuff lately. I've actually thought about possibly cutting a Krosan Grip and playing one Ancient Grudge right here. Also, if you do a white splash, Ray of Revelation is another consideration. I like the Ancient Grudge / Ray of Revelation type cards because they work really well with Gamble. So like if you have like no hand and you draw a Gamble and you need to like kill an ensnaring bridge so you can kill them with a 20/20. You have no hand because your loam got shut off or something, and the top that Gamble looks really bad because they have like Rest in Peace out or whatever the case is, or not Rest in Peace, that's not a good example at all. But they have like your loam shut off surgically, surgical or whatever. You draw this Gamble, it looks terrible, but you can gamble for the Ancient Grudge, discard it, and then you can flash it back. Destroy the bridge, kill them with 20/20. So it gives you some outs and some tough spots. Also, it's cheaper than Krosan Grip. And so in some matches that's important, like Painter, and so definitely this isn't set in stone. A lot of people like playing three or four Krosan Grips. Some people play 3 Krosan Grip, 1 Ancient Grudge. That's fine too. You can do that. Maybe cut the Needle. Needle is just a card dear to my heart. I think it's good in a lot of different matchups and situations. I look at it as a removal spell for. I like the flexibility of the card, because. It's also only 1 mana. Some people like playing Phyrexian Revoker in this spot. Personally, I don't like putting it on legs because that makes it susceptible to any kind of creature removal as well as your own Tabernacle. So that's rather annoying. Plus, it costs extra mana. But it has the advantage of being able to name stuff like LED and Lotus Petal in those decks that come out of the Storm decks. But I really like the Pithing Needle. You can name Grizzlebrand. It's great against the sneak attack. Grizzlebrand, that type of deal. You come with a Pithing Needle. That could easily bait a Force of Will. It's a great card, Pithing Needle. It catches a lot of things. And I really like it against the Deathrite decks with multiple Wastelands because you can easily just play it and name Deathrite Shaman because people are going to keep Deathrite Shaman. And they'll keep weak hands with Deathrite Shaman because they're like, oh yeah, we can eat this loam. And then also pay attention to how you beat them the game before because they might have that mindset. They'll be thinking, oh yeah, he beat me with that loam before. I got a Deathrite, and so then you just keep the Pithing Needle, keep weak hands with sideboard cards, and you come with this Pithing Needle and you name the thing. Also, like those decks might be soft at 20/20, so they're over here with like, oh yeah, I got a hand with multiple Wastelands, So, and I'm just gonna sit over here and. He's never going to be able to 20/20 because I got 2 Wastelands. Boom, Pithing Needle. So I don't have to fight through these Wastelands. I don't have to sit over here and wasteland your stuff just to be able to try and get to a 20/20. It would take too long. So Pithing Needle is great in that spot. And even though we play our own Wastelands, we have Ghost Quarter, which in those matchups with the Wastelands and the Deathrites, they usually don't play any basics. So Ghost Quarter is like another Wasteland anyway. So that's another advantage of playing the Ghost Quarter over the Rashad and Port. But yeah, there's a lot of flexibility with the deck. You can, play whatever you want. You got Gamble to go get whatever you want. I've liked the Prime Time in this spot before. You go gamble it. Getting back to these spheres, the Gamble for the sphere. Like if they're playing an Omni Show deck, that's a really tough matchup. But you have this plan of, if they have Omniscience, to gamble for a Trinisphere early in the game, and then keep it in your hand and don't cast it. And then when your opponent plays the Show and Tell. You can just try and like keep playing your lone game or whatever, and then eventually they'll Show and Tell. You'll put in the Trinisphere, and then they won't have enough mana to actually cast another spell that turn. And then whenever they get in that spot, they have to pass the turn, wait till next turn where they have mana to cast Emrakul or whatever, and then you untap and you like draw and you like Krosan Grip, that Omniscience, and then they never got a chance to play a spell off of it, and you got the free sphere in play. While they're sitting over there with a Force Will in their hand. So, oftentimes you just gamble up this Trinisphere and keep it in your hand. That's why I like playing the 1 Trinisphere just as a gamble target for those situations. It also acts, like if you're playing as a deck with like 4 Snapcasters, you play a Trinisphere, they're never going to be able to get value out of their Snapcaster. You know, if you're worried about surgicals and stuff, like it's a lot easier to play around when you got spheres. I don't recommend the spheres and artifacts against most fair decks. Pretty much any of them, really. But sometimes you know they might not see it coming. You could blindside somebody with sphere resistance, you know, and just steal a game. Which brings me to a couple of questions that were brought up on Facebook about the deck. Obviously, if you have any questions about the deck, any questions or any suggestions, just drop them down below in the comments section. I'm going to look at the comments. I'll be interacting in the comments. So I really look forward to any ideas you have or answering any questions that I left out or didn't go into enough depth. Let's see. So you have... what do we have here? Yeah, so, yeah, we went over the Rashad Important Ghost Quarter. How often and when to mull? Usually with a hand, you want to have some form of acceleration, right? And then some part of the engine. You know, you've seen how I broke down these piles. Kind of think about it like this. You know, you got your engine in the middle. So make sure you have the mana to cast your spells. You need some part of the engine. If you have one part of a combo and a crop rotation, that's kind of like having two parts of the combo. You're going to have to figure out how to force that crop rotation in and the best spot to do so. But, you know, those hands are keepable. We got a Mox Diamond with a crop rotation in one part of the combo. I'm keeping that all day. So most hands are keepable. But you want to mulligan if it's a little slow. If you're on the draw and something different, if you know the matchup, you know, you need a removal because they're a heavy creature deck, you know, or you know they have answers at 20/20, so that doesn't look as good as, you know, something else. Definitely don't be scared of mulligan. The deck mulligans pretty well because you regain card advantage with life from loam pretty fast. Let's see. So weaknesses, spell decks are a problem. Show and tell, death and taxes. Death and taxes is not a weakness. That's like one of the best fair decks against lands because they can attack both sides of your you know, your resource denial isn't that good against them, and they have multiple ways to attack the 20/20. So let's see what meta to play it in. Usually, if they have a lot of Delver decks, you know that's a good meta. You should definitely test the match and learn it because they can beat you. So, but just knowing all the best iterations of what you're doing, you know, you want to learn how to play against each deck. You just get as many reps in as possible. How bad do you need Tabernacle? You need Tabernacle. I mean, you can't play this deck without Tabernacle. I hate to tell you, but. Let's see, when to gamble and why. We went over that earlier. All the different ways that you can gamble. We went over the evolution deck, how to not get hated out. We went over that. How often and when to mull. Great. Rashad Port and Ghost Quarter. Matchups. Okay, so like generally if you see a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman or Deathrite deck, you want to make this 20/20. And all those matchups are pretty good. Sometimes you can get in a spot where you can kill the Deathrite and then resource deny him, but you don't want to commit too many cards to the graveyard whenever they have a Deathrite Shaman out. But you need to be making progress towards a 20/20 because that's usually your route to victory game 1. All those matchups are pretty easy. Just expect surgicals coming out of the board. So come with Tireless Tracker is another way to draw cards. And that's pretty much it on that. For sideboarding, Mana Bond gets boarded out very often. The only time I leave it in is against combo to where we can have the nut draw hand. And then also against tempo decks like Delver, because if you're on the draw or just in general you want to play a Mana Bond, it usually earns a daze or a force or something like that, you know, so it's, and you need the acceleration at some point to where you're not left far behind. But generally any deck with like Deathrite, you're probably going to board out this Mana Bond. It's pretty bad, especially when you board in a lot of spells, like you're boarding a lot of spheres and whatnot. You know, this Krosan Grip, if you're playing Krosan Grip, Mana Bond's out because you gotta sandbag some of these cards sometimes, drop a honey, you know, and so like it's a very easy cut because it's a fact you really can't use if you have spells that you're trying to save because you have to discard them if you activate it. Don't be scared to board out a life from loam. Sometimes you can board out two, depending on the matchup. It sounds crazy, but it is the engine in the deck. But some decks are just too fast, or they attack your life from loam so hard that you probably want to get rid of the life from loam. So these are cards that you can board out. Against combo, I take out the slow stuff, you know. Combo, I usually board out all of the punishment fires. Definitely board out the Barbering, you know, Glacial Chasm if they're killing you with non-damage, Tabernacle usually. You know, some of these lands are good against different combo decks, but most of the time they usually come out. Mazavith comes out quite often in combo matches. and you board low on them in the control matches, and some people board them all out in control matches. I like keeping one in, but there's a lot of feelings and flow. You know, you got to get a feelings and flow. You know, it's kind of hard for me to describe to you exactly what in and what out. I'm gonna do a paper article with the matchup breakdown for sideboarding in about a week or two. Really put a pen to paper on it with the changes that I'll make leading into that tournament and the team tournament out in Atlanta. So be looking forward to that on StarCityGames.com. I definitely am going to be writing an article for them about lands, so we're going to get into more depths, and then if there's an individual matchup you want me to sideboard, I can explain it, just write it down below, but I'm not going to go into each matchup. But generally, the way you want to think is like the cards. You know, dark depths, you can board out a dark depths, you know. Like if they're not super soft, if they're super soft to it, and you want the natural dark depths, you want all 4 of them. But like if you know you're going to grind them out, like they're playing Eldrazi, you know, or they're playing Maverick, or Death and Taxes. Those are matches like where they interact with your 2020 hard. You want to board down to 2 of them, you know, because you're not planning on killing them with the 2020. Eventually, yes, but don't be scared to board out a couple of them. You know, board out 2 dark deaths for 2 drop of honeys. You know, they're playing Maverick, they're playing Death and Taxes. That's an easy swap right there because they can interact with your 2020 a lot easier. They're playing 3 Karakas, you know. So go for the resource denial. You can cut some dark depths in those situations. So there's nothing sacred really. You know, you can cut a loam, you can cut dark depths, you can cut gambles. If they're heavy on, if they're like a Chalice of the Void deck, I'll definitely cut down crop rotations. I pretty much never board out crop rotation in any match that plays Wasteland because it's a big rope-a-dope whenever you have a land and they go to Wasteland and you crop rotate that land away. You know, it's like they're paying for your crop rotation for you. They're like wasting their own land in that situation. So be careful for that if you play Wastelands against lands, and then also be looking to take advantage of that if you're a lands player. So yeah, pretty much I never board out these. Sometimes I'll board out one if I just can't make them wind up and I'm taking too long to sideboard or something. Ancient Tomb I pretty much keep in the deck every time. Mox Diamonds I keep in all the time. I can't really see instances where I would cut a Mox Diamond. It is possible, but I doubt it. Maybe some. I pretty much never cut Mox Diamond. I think these are like the never cuts here. It's like Mox Diamond, Thespian Stage. Well, I'll never cut those. You know, any of these mana producing lands, the cycle lands against combo decks where they're a little slower. I mean, they're a little fast or whatever. You can maybe cut like a Sheltered Thicket or a Tranquil Thicket or something. You know, you can maybe cut one if you're not worried about like hitting your thing, about protecting your loam. I mean, I still like keeping all the cycle lands because they cycle you in your sideboard cards. So I generally can cut a couple gambles. I like cutting a couple gambles, especially whenever I'm going for like if I'm cutting a loam. You know, don't be scared to cut a couple gambles because you got to cut something at some point. And if you got like a bunch of spheres and stuff, you want to gamble for the sphere. You know, you probably want to cut. You know, these Punishing Fires that generally come out whenever you're trying to play sphere resistance. You know, because these don't line up because these are usually against spells and they don't play any creatures. You know, this is what you want. You know, except in the instance like elves. Elves is a little weird to sideboard against because you bring in so many cards for them, or sometimes you don't bring in any. You know, it really it depends on how you're feeling. You know, like you got Maze of Ith. I mean, you can go with it any. This is very subjective. You know, because all your deck is good against them, your whole deck. So which way do you want to get them? You know, generally, if I'm on the draw, this is the best advice I can give you for the sideboard. This will sum it up better. If you got sphere resistance, if I'm on the draw, I probably don't board it in. You know, I try and do like a Molten Vortex, Punishing Fire type plan. Or I don't board heavy on it. Maybe I just board in 2. You know what I'm saying? But if I'm on the play, I'm going to try and run this. If the sphere is good against them, I'm going to try and run the sphere down their throat. Because we're on the play. So that way, if you have a hand with a sphere with no Ancient Tomb, at least, or no Mox, it'll be reasonable to play it on turn 2. You know? It's reasonable. Now, if you're on the draw, it's going to be way worse. So I think, you know, sometimes I'll win game 1 because I'm playing lands, and then I'll play against like a Delver or some kind of control deck, and then, you know, game 2 they'll surgical me out, and I kept all my, or unknown because I beat them too fast game 1, and then I see that they're playing like a heavier control deck. They got multiple Snapcasters and surgical. Then I'll reboard. Don't be scared to reboard, or at least pretend like you reboarded. so you don't give away any information. But then like game 3, now we're on the play, boom, sphere's coming in. Then I jam that sphere on you turn 1, and you just lost the game, you know, real quick, you know, because you boarded out abrupt decays or something, you know, like you didn't have a removal spell for it, or you boarded out force will, or you know, any old kind of thing. You know, you kept the hand with surgical, and then like not a force of will, and then here comes sphere. And when you get the sphere out, you don't have to. They got to have mana to be surgical, and so it makes it, you know, and their cantrips, everything. You know, sphere's great. So yeah, don't be scared to reboard. The best advice I give to you is play, try some different things. Tireless Tracker, you know, like sometimes you just need a different way to win. This guy's got me jammed up. This card, the best matchup I think for Tireless Tracker is the Death and Taxes match, because he brick walls their creatures. You know, they're not going to mom to get the damage through them, you know, and then he generates card advantage while they have Rest in Peace out, so you can go around with Loam. They're light on removal, so sometimes he'll take a swords, you know, for the team. You know, try and play him like you play him in standard. Play him and then play fetch land, where you can get 2 clues. That way, if he dies, he dies. If he dies, he dies. So, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory. You know, this for the artifact enchantment. You know, if you're unsure, you want to board one end, don't be scared to do it. That's what I'm talking about. You know, the deck flows. You know, it's like, I'm a little scared. You know, what if he comes with, you know, that's why I like an Ancient Grudge here instead of a Krosan Grip. Because like it's like, man, this dude's playing like Delver or something crazy, or he's got some Baleful Strix action, you know, and it's like, you know, I'm gonna come with this one Ancient Grudge just because I know I've seen a Baleful Strix, but I don't really know what he's doing. And then he boards in a Pithing Needle or something crazy like an Ensnaring Bridge, and you're like, boom, I got an Ancient Grudge, I got something I can go gamble for to save my butt. And you know, so you know, maybe you board in one just because you're unsure. You know, this dude might have a Leyline, or you know, generally you don't need to worry about the board that much if you keep the combo in, because any kind of hate card that comes this way, you need to like, you can come at them the other way. You know what I'm saying? So don't be too leery about, oh, I gotta like hate their hate card or something like that. No, just beat them down. You know, just know what your plan is. That's the thing. Have a plan for every match. I think this whole idea supersedes the lands deck, but is personified best in this deck. Is have a plan for what you're trying to do. You know, like, you know, and then have a backup plan. And it's all gonna work out. You know, that's a life lesson, baby. But this is lands. This is a great deck. It takes a lot. It's a lot of fun. Every turn of the game is exciting. Every decision is so meaningful. It's not mindless at all. You know, a lot of people, I think the deck catches a lot of flack because people are like, oh yeah, sure, make it 2020 on turn 2, easy game. You know, the deck's easy. Yeah. Oh no, it's nothing like that. You know, half the time it's not even right. I'll have it, won't make it. You know, I'll copy something else just because I'm not feeling it. You know, you're playing around some stuff. So don't get caught off guard and get some games in. I think you're gonna love this deck. And thanks so much for coming out to the stream. Thanks for watching this Deck Tech brought to you by Jody Keith. This is the deck I played in, and I wouldn't make any changes. I think the worst card on my sideboard was probably Tireless Tracker, but he seems like I've been slowly decreasing the numbers, and I definitely boarded him in a couple times. Never drew him, never really wanted to draw him, but I didn't play against much Death and Taxes. Would have been good in the finals if I would have won that gamble, but this is where we ended up, and I think it's going to stay the same. If your local meta has a lot of Storm decks or something, maybe you want to play this main over the Caracas, to where you can have a way to remove their graveyard game 1 to sneak a win against Passing Flames with crop rotation or something, you know. But outside of that, the list is pretty set. If you want to play an extra Punishing Fire, you can add a 4th Grove, just cut one of these cycle lands. If you prefer Punishing Fire, I prefer the cycle lands because they go into the combo more than removal. Maze of Ith is also removal, so you can go down on a Maze if you want to go up on Punishing Fire. I've tried that. I wouldn't suggest it. I like Maze of Ith. Neither one of them produce mana, so they're pretty interchangeable right there. So definitely give it a try. Check out the stream down below, and you know, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up so people can find it. And I hope y'all enjoy the deck. One love, good vibes. And I'll see you in the Goon Squad soon, baby.